Today, we're going to talk about origins. We're going to ask the question, where did we come from? We're also going to ask the questions, how do we become who we are today? When did it all start? And how did it all start in the first place? There are many beliefs about the origins of life and our creation. While this class will focus primarily on the theory of evolution to answer these questions, I am by no means discrediting your own beliefs with regard to the creation of the universe and all humanity. In fact, I encourage you to share your beliefs with regard to our origins. I will set up at the end of this module a discussion thread for you to share what you believe is the beginnings of humans on Earth. So, what is evolution? Evolution does not claim we came from apes. Evolution states, however, that humans, Homo sapiens, share a common ancestor with other primates, such as our closest evolutionary relative, the chimpanzee. Evolution is the biological model for the history of life on Earth. The theory of evolution is not a statement on the existence of a God or the soul. You can believe in a God and have a devout religious belief, and still see evolution as a description of how all life on Earth came about. As it states in the article, What is Evolution? Evolution refers to the change through time as species become modified and diverge to produce multiple descendant species. Evolution and natural selection are often conflated, but evolution is the historical occurrence of change, and natural selection is one of many mechanisms, in most cases, the most important, that can cause it. Therefore, evolution refers to descent with modification. Small modifications occur, for example, over time at the genetic level in our DNA within each generation. And these genetic changes can affect how an organism or species interacts with its environment. As you learned in the previous model with regard to our genetics, you could see that how it is possible for our DNA to mutate. Over time, accumulation of these genetic changes can alter the characteristics of the whole population. And because of that, a new species essentially emerges. All life today can be said to be traced back to a common ancestor some 3.85 billion years ago. There are many people who believe that God created the universe and formed all humans. However, science tells us that the universe essentially began with the Big Bang, and over billions of years, the galaxies, our solar system, and planet formed. Often people debate between science and religion. You may ask yourself the question, why do anthropologists apply the scientific model versus any particular religious belief in describing the cultural diversity of Earth and beliefs, especially with regard to our origins? I believe the answer centers around the fact we can only study what we observe. The anthropologist is not saying there is no God. The anthropologist is actually not making any judgments on belief whatsoever. And if you do believe in God, there's always the aphorism, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. In other words, just because we cannot observe evidence for the existence of a God or spiritual reality does not mean we conclude it does not exist. We just simply cannot say anything about it scientifically. Assuming that God exists, for the nature of such an entity would transcend the physical dimensional reality of the universe, making it impossible for observation anyways. Therefore, epistemologically, the best we can do in terms of certainty in the way we obtain knowledge is using the scientific method. The scientific method can be divided into two primary categories: empirical science and historical science. Empirical science entails a systematic approach to epistemology that uses observable, testable, repeatable, and falsifiable experimentation to understand how nature commonly behaves. It finds its implementation in such disciplines such as immunology, rocket science, molecular biology, etc. We even use it in anthropology, and I use it as an archaeologist. Historical science involves the interpretation of evidence and the deduction of past occurrences, which is normally based upon an underlying supportive paradigm. As you can see in this slide, the scientific method consists of some basic elements. We make some initial observations, and from those initial observations, we may ask ourselves questions that ultimately result in us forming a hypothesis that explains what we're observing. This hypothesis is essentially a testable explanation from which we may make predictions. And we test those predictions by collecting data that we observe. And based on our observations, we're able to say whether our hypothesis is correct or incorrect. And these results are often repeated in order to verify that we are achieving similar or the same results in support or rejection of our hypothesis.